Hi everyone, it's Tamara here again with another card making tutorial. This time I'm doing some of the ACT cards to go with my previous video with Penny and her friends Halloween from Wondering Wabbit. So these are actually a couple of the ATC cards, and I'll have another video with another two coming up shortly. So let's get started. So initially I'm going to start on doing some ink blending panels. So I'm going to be doing 4 ACT cards, 2 today and 2 another day. And I'm going to just be showing one of the panels because I'm going to do all of them exactly the same. I'll be using Distress Oxides in Squeeze Lemonade, Mustard Seed and Black Soot, and just using my Dome Sponge applicators to get that all layered up. So I'm going in with my Squeeze Lemonade, and I'm just going with making this into 3 portions. So I've kind of tried to make it as even as possible, but I'm only wanting just that little bit of black at the top. So I only put a little bit, and then I'll bring up the mustard seed into the black, and that just makes sure that we don't overwhelm the scene with that black soot. I only just use a little bit up the top. So I'm going to now do some splattering. So I'm going to be using some acrylic paints in just black and white to do my splattering, and just putting it down on my glass mat. Initially I'll go in with my white acrylic paint. So I'm just adding some water to blend that down so that it makes it much easier to splatter. So just kind of do a few little tests and see how much water you need. I needed more because it just wasn't splattering onto my panel, and I wanted some nice big splatters on there. So I'm giving that a good tap against my finger, and you can see now that that is working really well, and I'm getting the white splatters that I'm wanting. So I tried tapping it against the box, but it's definitely much easier to tap against your finger. Now we'll do the same thing with the black. So I put a lot more water on this one and kind of mix that around on my glass mat. It's really good having this glass mat because it makes it very easy to clean up once you've made a mess like I am now. So I'm getting that nice big black splatters onto my card base or my little ACT panel. So I'm going to just move this around to try and get a more even spread of that black. And now I'll set that aside to dry while we do the colouring. And I did the other 3 panels off camera. So I'll have all the colours up in the top left hand corner as I colour through, but I'll also have them listed in the description box below for you. So we'll colour up Penny first in her little pumpkin outfit. So I'm going in with, I went in with my lightest colour first just to work out where my shadows were going to be. I'm kind of having the shadow coming straight above. And now I'm just going to work through my colours to get that all coloured out. So just working in little kind of flicking motions and circular motions to get a nice smooth blend between the colours. So our next in our combo is E21. So we'll just work out that E13 and come back in with that original colour that I laid down the shadows with, the E00. Now I'm just going to do her nose because I did forget to do that. So I just put a little bit of shadow with the E13 and then use the E21. Now I'm going in with the lightest colour for her hair, the E35, just to work out where all my kind of shadows will be. So her little hat will be throwing a little shadow, as well as just where her hair like meets in with that band. And then I'll go in with now the darkest colour, the E39, but then decided I wanted a little bit darker, so I went E79 just to get a little bit more contrast in that hair. So I'm just working in little flicking motions to try and get it to look like strands of hair. The next colour will be E37, so I'm just slowly building into that white cardstock, which will be our highlight area, and just flicking that out, and then come back in with that lightest colour, the E35, to finish off the colouring of her hair. And just flicking that out into our highlight space. Now we'll put some colour on her little pumpkin hat, and we'll also use the same colour so that we're not grabbing too many colours out for her shirt and little fold over the top of that pumpkin. So I'm just going in with my E81 markers and I thought that looked a little bit dull there sitting on top of her hair, so I've just grabbed out some of my G markers, the G99 and 94, just to kind of add a little bit more contrast, and finished off with the G82, and I end up using that combo for the shirt and the little top of the pumpkin. So I'm just putting in my shadows now. Because these are quite small, I'm going in straight with the darkest colour, the G99, blend that out with the G94, and then again with the G82 as the highlight colour. So we've got that all coloured out, and now let's start on her little pumpkin outfit. So I'm just going to go with my lightest colour and just work out where all my shadows are going to be. So obviously her head will be throwing a little bit of shadow up the top where her arms kind of push back, and then also the bottom that folds underneath her will be in shadow. So I'm just going in now without my darkest marker, which will be E09. It's got a very nice kind of browny red colour. And then I'm going to do a bit of tip to tip to get a nice blend out with my YR68. And just working in little flicking motions, just slowly picking up that E09 colour on the tip of my YR68. And I just feel it helps with a nice smooth transition. Now I'll just blend out that YR68 with the standard colour, then bring in my YR15, and then we'll finish off with that initial colour that we used, the YR12, as the highlight colour on her top of her sleeves and just in the middle of our pumpkin. So just making sure that I work that colour out. Now with the leggings, because I'm going to do stripes, I'm just going to initially go in with the same markers I use for the pumpkin and fully colour up these leggings. So I'm just making sure that I'm getting a bit of shadow between where those legs are going to be sitting. And then we're just going to set that to dry for a little bit before we put our stripes in. Because the black, we're going to be using some end markers. They're going to really cover up that orange anyway, and we'll be able to do our little stripes so that she's got black and orange striped legs. Just find when they're quite small, it's easier to do the lightest colour first fully, and then go over with the darkest colour to add your stripes in. So now I'm just colouring out those shoes, and I'll just put a little bit of colour. I forgot to put a little colour on her hairbands, so I'm just going to use a couple of the markers I use for her outfit. And now I'm going to finish off the bottom of her shoes, and because I'm going to be using these end markers in her leggings, I thought I'll just use them for the bottom of the shoes as well. And now that those leggings are nice and dry, I'm going to go in and put the shadows in with my darkest end marker, N8. Blend that out with my N6. And then the lightest colour is going to be my N4 as my highlight colour. And that's the colouring of Penny done. So now we'll go with her little vampire friend that she's going trick-or-treating with. Again, I'm going in with the lightest colour, which in this combo will be E000. Then I'm going in just with a really light hand with the E04 because I want him to look quite pale because he is a vampire and obviously doesn't get out in the sun very much. I forgot to actually put that E04 marker on his hand, so I'm quickly doing that. And then we're going to blend that out with the E01. So slowly working that colour out. Obviously he will have a bit of shadow thrown on his hair and on the right hand side of his face because he's kind of got his face pointed out. And we're going to go in and colour those shadows at the bottom of his hands. The next colour in our combo is E00, and then we'll bring back in that highlight colour of the E000 to blend out. And then we'll go in and colour up his his mouth. So I just go in with the E04 and the R22, and then I'm going to have a nice red tongue because he's been drinking some blood with the R27 and R24. Now I'm going to colour up his little shirt, his little teeth first, and then I'll colour the hair. Going in with my lightest colour first to work out my shadows, which is the C5, and then just working in little flicking motions, coming out where that part is and also at the bottom base of the top of the hair with the C9, and then blend that out with the C7. And again, just working those little flicking motions and just going in with the way that the hair is shaped. And that makes it look very realistic. Now we'll flick out with that highlight color again, that C5. And now his hair is all done. Now for his little shirt, I'm going to use the C3 because I want it to look like a white shirt, but we want to add some shadow in there to give it a little bit of interest. And then we'll start coloring up his cape. So I'm just going a standard black cape using my C9 markers. So I had them out for the hair, so I thought I'd use that again. Obviously his hand, where that in that fold of the cape, there'll be a bit of shadow, and also thrown by that little lolly container. And obviously where these little folds are on his cape at the top and where his arms come, there'll be some shadows there as well. We'll blend that out with our C7, just slowly working out where those folds are, where the shadows are, flicking up as we work out that color, just extending those little folds and shadows, and just working in little tiny flicks to get a nice smooth blend. Now we're going to bring in our C5 to blend out that collar and also work on those folds again, just leaving a little highlight at the very top and a little bit down the bottom on that left hand side, and then we'll just have a small amount of highlight on our little right hand side of the cape. And I'm just going to use my C3, which I'd used on his shirt and teeth, to finish off this blend of the cape. And just making sure we get a nice smooth blend by working those colors together. Now I realize I missed his shirt that also comes on his arms, so I'm just going to bring those C markers in again, so the C3, and because there's not a huge amount of space there, I just use the C00 to blend that out. Now we'll colour up his little tie and also his little waistcoat. So I'm going with some red markers, the R89 as my shadow colour. Blend that out with the R29. So obviously where that little waistcoat folds over, there'll be a shadow, and also where the folds are in his tie. Blend that out with the R27. Slowly working into that light space, and our final highlight colour will be our R24. Just being careful around those little buttons. And now I'm just going to do black pants. So I thought, well, I've got these red markers out, I'll just put a little bit of red detailing on his little cuffs. So I just went R89, I forgo the R29 and went with the 27 and finished off with the 24 because they're not a big space. And we may as well colour his socks up red so that we can highlight them against what I'll do is black pants and black shoes. So now we'll bring in our end markers again, sorry, our C markers. I'll keep using the C's and just flick those out. Obviously where his cuffs fold over, and in the middle of those will be in shadow, and obviously where the folds of his pants are, where that little waistcoat folds over, we'll blend out with the C7. And obviously the bottoms of his shoes, and then at the top we'll have the highlight colour. So blending that out with the C5, and then we'll finish off our blend with that C3 again as our highlight colour. And blend that out, just working in little circular motions, getting a nice smooth blend there. Just a quick colour of the bottom of his shoes, and I'm going to use the same like orange markers that I used for Penny's little outfit to colour up this, so I don't need to grab out any extra colours. So again, I just did that little tip to tip, then bring in the YR15 and finish off with our YR12 as our highlight colour. And that's all this colouring done. Oh, sorry, I forgot his little buttons, so we'll get those done. The C9 down the bottom and the C5 for the highlight at the top. Now for the actual ACT cards themselves, I've just grabbed a rounded stitched rectangle die from La La Land Crafts, and I'm going to cut that out 4 times, and it just creates a nice rounded rectangle, and with that beautiful stitching detail. Now I've got my ink blended panels now, and I've chosen this rectangle die that fits in perfectly between the stitching detailing on that rounded square or rectangle, sorry. Now I'm going to just line that up, kind of adding a little bit of black at the top and making sure we've got kind of an even color of the mustard seed and squeeze lemonade at the bottom, and that fits in perfectly with that rounded rectangle die. I did the rest off camera, but now I'm going to do a couple of different sentiments using this set from Lawn Fawn. So I thought it was going to be cute to have 2 little kind of sentiments that will work well with this set. So Spooktacular for our vampire and super cute for our little pumpkin penny. So I've just grabbed out some black cardstock and prepped that with my anti-static powder tool, and using my Versa watermark ink will give that a stamp. Grab my folded piece of A4 printer paper and my white heat embossing powder, get that all layered on, and just tip that back into the bottle so we can reuse that later on. I've preheated my heat tool and gone in the back first, and then we'll go to the front and get that all nice and melted and set that aside to dry. Now these panels are dry, I've just cut them in half so that I can cut them out without getting any, in the way of the other one. So I've grabbed out a sentiment banner, run that through my die cutting machine with one end the way I want, because it is a little bit longer than the actual sentiment. And then to make sure we have a perfectly sized sentiment, I've just added it the same distance on the right hand side. You only need to go into that little bit until it cuts. And now we've got our perfect sentiment, and I'll do the same with the extra sweet. Now with our little backgrounds, I'm going to add some extra details with black cardstock. So I'm going to add a little bit of a grassy border down the bottom of each of the cards using this grass border from La La Land Crafts, and also these spooky fences from La La Land Crafts as well, to add a little bit of interest at the back there, and it will still allow all that beautiful ink blending to show through. So I'm going to run the border through the die cutting machine and also my little fences. So we'll run that through and just pop that out with our little tool to get that to come out. It wasn't coming out, so I just have this little craft pick, just push that out and that comes out perfectly. And then we'll run our little fence through our die cutting machine as well. Line that up. Now it was moving about a little bit, so it did move, so now I've kind of redone that and just held that down as I push that through the die cutting machine. And now we've got these cute little fence panels, so we'll just pop out all the inner panels and you'll see that we've got this creepy little fence that will go perfectly behind. Now for our vampire, I also did some of the grass border in black, but I'm going to do a couple of bats in black as well, so that we can put that at the top for his background. So I've run that through our die cutting machine. So I'm only going to use the 2 smallest bats, so I'll keep that largest one for another card. And now we'll get started with the assembly. So I'll pop the vampire to one side with all of his elements, and now we're going to line up Penny's elements. Now because we only need a small portion of this grass, I'm going to just work on this panel before I actually attach it to our black base, because we will need to trim that grass off to size. So I'm just working out where everything is, because we'll also need to trim those little fences as well. And I'm just working out where Penny will stand and where everything's going to be laid out, including our sentiment, which will pop up the top left-hand corner. So it's always good just to work out where everything's going to lay before you start sticking things down, and make sure that everything's not going to be too crowded. Now to make sure, because I'm going to have my little fences at the back of the grass, I'm just working out where they'll need to sit to be glued down first, and then I'll have the grass glued on top of them. So I've just grabbed out my little precision glue too, which just puts a really small amount of glue on these like little intricate pieces. So I'm just getting this small little dots on those, just on the section that I need. Because the rest is going to be cut off, and we don't want to get any glue where we don't want it to stick onto our little panel. So I'm just making sure I'm putting that in the right spot. And then I did the same with our other side. So I did the glue off camera. We'll stick that down. And now I just need to work out where I want our little grass panel to go. So I've grabbed out a pencil and just going to line that up on the back side and just use a pencil to mark where I need the glue, and then I'll just get that squeezed all onto the back, and then we can stick that down, and then there will be no glue in the other sections where we're going to cut that off, so we won't cause a huge mess on our work surface. So I'm just making sure I'm lining that up in the correct spot, get that pressed down and give that a good press. Now we'll set that aside to dry before we trim it up. Now while that's drying, I'm going to get some foam tape on the back of our penny and our sentiment. For our sentiment, because I've used black cardstock, I'm going to use some black foam squares, and for penny just some white. Now that that panel has dried, I'm just going to trim off the excess on either side. I always find it's best to do it from behind, and that way you can see what you need to cut and you won't accidentally cut your panel. So now we'll get our panel attached to our black card base. So just get a small amount of glue on the back, and with those stitching lines we can line that up nice and easy, just making sure I don't put glue where I don't want it. I've got some on my fingers, just lining that up, and we'll set that aside to dry. Now we'll also work on our vampire panel. So I've done the same thing with the grass and just put a small amount of glue on the section that I want for the front. So we'll just line that up on the bottom and then allow that time to dry, and just trim off the edges the same way from the back, and that way we can see. Now that that panel's ready, I'm going to put some glue off camera onto the back, and we'll get that lined up on the back of its black cardstock, and making sure that's nice and centered. Now we'll finish off our little penny ACT card. So I've taken off all the release paper off the back of the foam tape on penny and lined her up over that fence. And now I'll do the same with our sentiment, just aligning that up with the edge of our panel. It was a little bit crooked, so just lift that slightly and push that down. And now we'll finish off with our vampire. Now I have already taken the release paper off, so that's why they're all turned upside down. I just need to work out where I want to put these bats before I get everything stuck down, to make sure I've got enough room for my sentiment. Now, as you can see, there wasn't quite enough room with our vampire on the right, so I've moved him over to the left, and now our sentiment will fit in perfectly to the right, and then our spots for our bats are ready to go. So it's always best to line everything up and make sure you've got enough room before you stick everything down. So I've made sure my spectacular is faced the right way, and we'll get that attached. And now we'll get some glue on the back of our bats and get them attached. Now this one I'll put all over the back because it will be fully on the back panel. So just being careful not to get glue where I don't want it. Give that a bit of a press down. Now this one I'm only needing to put glue in the center because part of the wings will be hanging off the edge of the card. So put a bit of glue in the middle. Now just making sure I don't have too much glue there. I've just wiped it off a little bit with my finger, and we'll just line that up and get that attached. And these are the two finished ACT cards for today. Penny is just so adorable in a little pumpkin outfit, and you can just mix and match with the backgrounds to work in perfectly with your image, like the bat for the vampire. And you'll be able to see that they fit perfectly in this little ACT booklet that I made. So they just slot in there, ready and waiting for the next two I make in our next tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.